Welcome to Buffalo Rumblings Live. My name is Matt Warren. I'm joined tonight by Matthew Fairburn from Syracuse.com. Say hi, Matt.
Hey, how's it going, guys?
You might remember Matthew. We talked with him about rookies during training camp this year, and he, of course, used to write for one of our, I don't know, I hate calling them sister sites because, we're bros, but so our brother site over at mockingthedraft.com and now has moved on to become the Bills beat reporter for Syracuse.com. So he's been around the team a lot. He's been traveling with the team and covering them and things like that. And we're here to talk a little bit about E.J. Manuel to start with, at least. And Matthew wrote a column for Syracuse.com on Monday talking about how E.J. Manuel was set up to fail. Matthew, why don't you go through the three key points of that, that thesis of that article before you talk about what happens next for E.J. What three things set E.J. Manuel up to fail with the Buffalo Bills?
Yeah, I think, to start off with it just has to do with the fact that he probably wasn't worth the number 16 overall pick in the 2013 NFL Draft. And as soon as he was the number 16 pick, the expectations were through the roof. And, Manuel is a guy who was more of a developmental guy. He was a project, obviously. I mean, people saw him play 14 games. They know he had a lot of work to do, and he didn't progress as much as he needed to. But the expectations were just totally warped as soon as he got drafted in the first round and was the first quarterback off the board in a draft that was pretty light on quarterbacks to begin with. And, that was a pretty big part of, why he was sort of immediately set up to fail. And then the whole clock of the whole Buffalo Bills rebuild was really expedited recently because of the sale of the team. And, everybody seems to be under this intense pressure. And, that was a huge reason why, you saw, everybody sort of making these snap decisions. And I'm not saying that moving on from Manuel is a snap decision, but I do think there was probably, it was made a little bit quicker than it might have been made in a different circumstance. Blaine Gabbert got 27 starts, for instance, and Blaine Gabbert was much worse than Manuel ever was with the Bills. And so, in a different circumstance, maybe Manuel gets a little bit more time, and that would have been good. And another thing is, he played too early. That was never really the design for E.J. Manuel. Like I said, he was a developmental guy, but as soon as you change the expectations, people expect him to play early. And because he was the first quarterback off the board, and because Kevin Kolb got hurt, in training camp, all of a sudden E.J. Manuel was thrown into the fire right away. And you look at the year he came in, right before that, Andrew Luck, RG3, and Russell Wilson all had fantastic rookie seasons, so everyone's kind of expecting, that to be the new norm for rookie quarterbacks, and obviously that wasn't the case for EJ. He probably would have been a lot better suited to sit back and learn, but the whole clock got screwed up, and his expectations didn't really meet his talent level.
Yeah, over at Tomahawk Nation, they last spring, right before the draft, they wrote kind of this analysis of E.J. Manuel, and they hit the nail on the head. So I posted it again today on our web rumbling section and our social media, and it talked about a lot of the same stuff you were talking about how he was going to be overdrafted and probably expected to play sooner rather than later. I think the Bills went in with all the best intentions of starting Kevin Kolb last year. Then he had 2 injuries in training camp, including his career-ending concussion. And like I said, the intentions were there. They just weren't able to find the guy to do it, and it just kind of fell on Manuel. And it was unfortunate for him at the time. It might have been more unfortunate if it had been, say, Jeff Toole starting as an undrafted free agent, but that's, neither here nor there. And even this year when they brought in Kyle Orton, it was right before the season started. I mean, it was a month ago, just over a month ago from today, Wednesday night, when we're talking about this. And it just felt like he never took the next step. He never progressed. And I think that the point about the new ownership has a lot to do with it too. And the Sammy Watkins deal was part of that. And so when you see guys like Sammy Watkins out on the field and Manuel can't hit them, it of course accelerates the conversation as well. And Doug Marone's playing for, or coaching for his job, and you can go right down the list with the whole thing. And do you think that there was a sense in the locker room that if Doug Marone didn't replace E.J. Manuel, there was going to be, I don't know, some gaskets blown by some receivers?
I think at some point we would have reached that, and Marone said that wasn't part of the decision, and
he can say it all he wants, but
he can say it all. He it's one of those things where he can say it all he wants, but he knows that the body language was there on Sunday. Anybody who watched the game on TV even saw it. Robert Woods throwing his hands up, even Watkins got times was just. We saw it in the Chargers game where he just came up short on a ball because he wasn't going to get himself killed over a bad E.J. Manuel pass. So I think, in talking guys today, it was funny because you kind of got a mixed reaction. Some guys were really surprised. Mike Williams said he was shocked when he heard the news on Monday. So you wonder if, but Sammy, on the other hand, kind of, didn't really, pile on E.J. per se, but he wasn't exactly too kind about it either. And so it was kind of interesting to get those reactions, and I do think at some point it was going to start to boil over, and Doug Marone got out ahead of it. I mean, give him credit for that, because I don't think the frustration was necessarily there yet, because I think there was frustration, but I don't think there was to the point of let's get this guy out of here, because I think guys expected him to get a little bit of a longer leash, but at the same time I don't know that anybody's necessarily complaining that he didn't.
So what did some of the other guys say about it? On Monday, we heard from both Fred Jackson and Eric Wood saying that before the news came out, they were, of course, supportive, and then after the news came out, they were supportive of Doug Marone's decision and things like that. But what did some of the other folks say today in the widespread media availability? Not talking about Kyle Orton or E.J. Manuel, but the other guys around them, especially on the offense. Yeah,
Sammy Watkins had some of the best stuff today. Which isn't necessarily characteristic of him, but just to pull a couple of his best quotes, he said, "Since we have a 10-year vet, a guy that can get the ball downfield, now it's on the wideouts. I expect to have to come out every play, every down, and expect the ball. Can't wait to play the game." And
that says so much.
That's pretty strong. I mean, and I don't, that was pretty strong on Sammy's part, and I don't know if he realizes how strongly that came off, but that wasn't the only thing he said. Of Kyle Orton, he's more of a veteran guy. The way he talks, the way he handles business, the way he looks at plays and breaks down defenses is kind of different than EJ. He reads it quicker, the ball's coming out faster. That's just something that we have to adjust to. And that kind of sums it up right there. And, Sammy's feeling a little bit more excited because he knows the ball is going to actually be coming to him now.
Well, he had 2 drops very early against the Texans. And as I think Sergeant Major Thor wrote in our comment section, you could just tell Major Thor said he looked pissed. He looked, I don't even know the right way to say it. He just looked like he wasn't expecting the ball to be where it was supposed to be. And so then when it was kind of where it was supposed to be, he just kind of was like almost surprised, and that was maybe one of the reasons he dropped it. Now I don't want to put words in his body language, so to speak, but it just looked. Well, Robert Woods, of course, throwing his hands up and clapping and being pissed off about, say, third down throws that were there to be had, but Manuel throws it on the wrong shoulder and he gets stopped a yard short or can't make the catch. And you could see it in the receivers. And Jeremy White actually pointed it out from WGR in his All-22 last week. Scott Chandler down in the red zone was open on a down and out, and he throws up his hands saying, "Hey, I was over here. What's going on?" And then Brian Galliford throws it in an All-22 earlier this week that I posted on Twitter and Facebook yesterday and in our fan chat section, where E.J. Manuel or Sammy Watkins has nobody within 10 yards of him, 5 yards back and 5 yards in front of him, and Manuel's even looking to that side of the field. It just seemed like so many times he was missing the receivers, so they were almost not even expecting the ball to get to them when he did pull the trigger. Is there a sense among, say, the offensive line or even the defense that moving to Kyle Orton gives them a better chance to win? And did anyone speak to that effect today?
It was tough to kind of get them to pull the trigger and come out too strongly, but it was one of those things where you say, you ask a guy, I think Fred Jackson was asked directly, do you think Kyle Orton gives you the best chance to win? And he said, well, the coaches do, so we're going to ride with it. And, that was sort of the general vibe you get. But I just do think that, I go back to the day that Kyle Orton was signed, and the first time we got to talk to Kyle Orton, there was just, and, we're asking everybody, oh, what do you think of Kyle Orton? What's it like to have him out there on the field? There was just this general vibe about the receivers, this excitement level about having this veteran guy in there. And you got the feeling that was going to be Manuel's undoing just because, we talked about the frustration earlier. Well, that stems from them knowing that there's a guy behind Manuel that can actually play. And that was the problem throughout training camp, which is why I thought EJ would get the whole year initially, was because there was nobody behind him. But as soon as Orton got there, that sort of, again, sped that clock up. It was like, okay, if EJ doesn't do this, everybody's under the gun. Players, coaches, front office, all the way down. And I think there is just a general sense that, this is their guy now, and that's the way they're going.
So let's talk about Kyle Orton and his journey to Buffalo this offseason. Russ Brandon, was on WGR today and talked a little bit about kind of the courting process, and they had been in contact with him through training camp. Have you talked to Orton or anybody else about? I remember when he was signed, he said some of the stuff along these lines. Why didn't he come into Buffalo a little bit sooner and maybe push EJ Manuel for a starting job sooner?
I think he was focused on his family at the time, and I don't think he entirely knew what he wanted to do. I'm not sure that he entirely had his mindset on continuing to play football. I think retirement definitely crossed his mind this summer, and it was sort of a messy ordeal with him leaving the Cowboys, where he considered retiring, and then they cut bait, and he didn't come back. It was like, so he sort of took some time off. He said he was focused on being a father, being a good dad to his kids, and when he decided it was time to play football again, I think the Bills were the ones that were coming after him the hardest, and he wouldn't come out and say it, but I asked him if he thought that if he picked this spot because he thought he could push for a starting job, and pretty much every time I asked him, he said he was the backup. He was content on being the backup, but I get the sense that he sort of took his time because he knew he could take his time, and then looked for a spot where maybe he could push for that role because he hasn't had it for a while. And I think there was a little bit of him that thought he needed one more shot at that before he was ready to call it quits.
We're talking with Matthew Fairburn from Syracuse.com, who covers the Bills for that publication. Buffberg Adelphia, one of our readers, asked, do you think we'll see the playbook open up more with Orton?
I don't know that we'll see the playbook open up a whole lot more, but what I think you'll see is Orton will read more of the field than EJ will, and that things will open up in that sense. You might see the playbook open up a bit. Maybe there's more that he's comfortable with. It's tough without talking to Hackett, but I think what you're going to see is instead of the quarterback reading half the field, Kyle's going to have the opportunity. The whole field is going to be open. The offense won't be as limited as it was under EJ, just because Orton's a bit more experienced and can read the field better.
This is kind of a tangent question, or a parallel question. Do you think that they are going to take some of the read option stuff out? I mean, there's still going to be some read option, like the run or pass stuff. If it's open underneath, hand it off to Fred, and if it's not, pull it back and make a pass. But we're not going to see Kyle Orton running with the ball, are we?
I don't anticipate seeing any 20-yard Kyle Orton runs on Sunday.
Eric Wood played it really coy on Monday when talking about it, which I thought was pretty hilarious, to be perfectly honest with you. But we're not going to see those 20-yard runs. Keep going with what you were going to say.
Yeah, that it goes back to that. I was listening to that as well with Eric Wood. It's like everybody knows what you got in Kyle Orton as an athlete. He's nothing special, but I do think some of that's a lot of their base running is out of that type of set. So I think you're not going to see that totally done away with. And I don't think that EJ necessarily carried the ball a great deal this year. So there weren't too many times where he was taking it himself on those. So I think it's something that they don't have to totally do away with, because, like you said, it's not totally necessarily Kyle Orton being a running threat. It's sort of a pass-run type deal.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like the other side of the coin is that Kyle Orton's only been here for a month, so instead of opening up the playbook, might they have to kind of sort of bring it back? I know he's a veteran and can read the whole field, and that won't be necessarily the problem, but is he going to have the full complement of plays in his toolbox when he goes out onto the field on Sunday?
I think he'll have, more. I think he has more of the playbook than people might realize after a month. I think he's got a pretty good grasp of it at this point, about as good a grasp as he can have without going on the field in a regular game. And what I think is that I also think people probably don't realize, or I guess going back to the last question, maybe people do realize, but I don't know that EJ had the whole playbook, so to speak, because
that's a good point.
In talking to Hackett, he said, in the plays that EJ's comfortable in, we love EJ. He does all these, he does amazing things in the plays he's 100% comfortable in. The problem is getting more of those plays that he's comfortable in and running those more. And to me, that says that he wasn't totally comfortable with the whole playbook, and so it was kind of limited in that sense. So, maybe there's a little bit more that Orton's comfortable with, and being a veteran, that'll be open to him. I don't think it'll be constricted in any way, though.
Outside of a pretty massive turnover, I'll just say, against the Texans, E.J. Manuel's been able to protect the ball pretty well this season. Do you think that that's going to be a problem with Kyle Orton? Ron from New Mexico puts the over-under at 3.5 Orton turnovers this weekend. Do you got the over or the under?
I'd probably take the under on that. Otherwise, I'd be a pretty big pessimist if I took the over on that.
Well, we're Bills fans. We know what pessimism is like.
But I mean, Detroit's defense is tough. I think it's a really, really tough task for Orton in his first week as a starter to be thrown into that type of environment, and against the top-ranked defense in the league right now, I think, and a great pass defense. They've sort of transformed themselves overnight. The only way he goes over that is if that defensive line really gets after it, which is always a possibility. But I think
let's talk about the offensive line here in a minute. But I mean, is Kyle Orton going to be running for his life and chucking the ball down the field?
I think at times, that's something that's sort of been overlooked because everybody's been on a witch hunt for EJ, which is understandable. He kind of brought some of that on himself, but people are kind of overlooking how poorly the offensive line played the last 2 weeks, almost night and day switch from the first couple weeks, and I think a lot of that had to do with them throwing the ball so much more and becoming a bit more one-dimensional, which was kind of a bizarre thing, especially in the Texans game. Ran the ball 7 times in the second half, once on third down the entire game. It was a really bizarre thing, especially when they were only down by 2 scores because that was Marone's explanation today. He said, we were down by 2 scores, that's why we got away from the running game. And to me, that was down by 2 scores for what, like a minute? Because that was right before EJ threw the 80-yard touchdown. But
can someone tell him what the percentage was in the first half when they weren't down by 2 scores? They were up?
Yeah, so the balance wasn't there. But in the first couple weeks when it was there, the pressure was off the offensive line, and they were doing okay. I mean, EJ was hardly getting touched. And then last week it just went. I mean, those guards it cannot be overstated how poorly they're playing. I mean, Eric Pierce has not been good. And Cyril Richardson was in his first start, so we'll give him that. And Doug Marone always says between start 1 and start 2 is when you see the biggest jump. So, hopefully he's better. But Eric
J.J. Watt is pretty good. J.J. Watt's pretty good, right?
Like, going up against J.J. Watt kind of makes that even tougher. But Chantrell struggled the last couple weeks, and the right side of the line has not looked good. But, I mean, what you're going to see out of Orton is a guy who I think a couple things with Orton that will help him. He's probably going to recognize the pressure quicker than Manuel did before the snap. He'll probably be able to set protections better and understand how to do that. And 3, he'll get rid of the ball quicker because I think that's a big problem with EJ. I mean, the guys have already talked about it. The ball's getting there quicker. Well, that's a big plus for the offensive line. It takes some pressure off them.
Right. The timing was an issue with E.J. Manuel a little bit, whether it was before, throwing too early, too late, ahead of receivers, behind receivers, not being able to hit them. I'm not even going to say in stride. I'll say close to in stride. Is that going to be a problem with Kyle Orton having, well, he had one day with them today, but having literally 1 week as the starting quarterback before getting thrown into the fire?
I think some of that will be there. I think that'll be a combination of the defense being as good as it is in Detroit, the receivers being so young, and Orton only being here. I mean, he hasn't been getting the brunt of the first team reps up until today. Was actually his first day getting those, and so that's going to be tricky. But I think, like you mentioned, it's not like it was great with EJ. So, and a part of that with EJ was him not being able to hit, guys anywhere close to where he was supposed to be hitting them. So I think maybe the only adjustment will be kind of like Sammy mentioned in kind of a not so subtle way. We have to get used to being where we're supposed to be and getting the ball. I mean, it might be as simple as that.
Before we move on to, say, some injury updates and the defense and things like that, is there anything else you want to say about E.J. Manuel getting benched for Kyle Orton and the offense's response?
I would say I was asked the question today on the radio whether it was too soon to bench E.J. Manuel. And I would just say this. To people who think it was too soon, I would say this, that in most circumstances I would agree that if you pick a quarterback in the first round, 14 games is too soon to judge. But in this case, I'm totally on board. And something I've said the last couple of days that I'll continue to say is I really respect the way Doug Marone went about this. I think the fact that he stood out there and when asked directly about whether Doug Whaley agreed with the move, said, I wasn't looking for agreement. This is my decision, and I told them this is how it's going to be. To me, that was kind of a cool move because you don't see this often. You don't see a team give up on a guy they pick in the first round this early. And to me, Doug Marone is saying, you know what? It's my job on the line. I'm going with the guy that's better. And to me, that was kind of an interesting and a gutsy move on his part, and now we just get to see how it plays out.
And that's really what they did with Sammy Watkins, too. Doug Whaley's like, well, my job's on the line. I'm going to go get the best guy I think is out there. It's also interesting. I like what you talked about with the Doug Marone stuff, and he not asking for agreement and things like that. That's great. It certainly doesn't dispel any of the notions about Doug Marone that he might be kind of a maverick and irritating some people at One Bills Drive. I don't know about that very very much, but that's the reputation he's starting to earn. So it's very interesting. Some of the other quarterbacks, first-round quarterbacks that haven't had 14 starts, Tim Tebow had 14. Ryan Leaf had 9. Jim Drunkmiller, I can't ever say his name. I can't remember how many he had, but it was less than 14. I passed it around some of the SB Nation writers, and those were the 3 big names we came up with. Like you said before, Blaine Gabbert had how many? 27?
27. Blaine Gabbert had 27 starts, and I mean, some of your readers I know that know I was a Jaguars fan. I suffered through those 27 starts. I'm also a Mizzou guy, so I mean, I've watched more Blaine Gabbert than any man should ever have to watch. But I think it's very similar to the Tebow thing to me, and it's because they kind of have similar problems as quarterbacks, and also it's a similar situation because as soon as EJ was drafted, I mean, you guys probably know because you had to write about it, how many people immediately thought, oh no, why did we draft this guy? So many people thought he was overdrafted to begin with, and so there was already this pressure to push him out the door before he was even in uniform. And the same thing happened with Tebow, and I mean, now Tebow's out of the league, and so people weren't necessarily wrong there.
We've been talking with Matthew Fairburn from Syracuse.com. Okay, let's move on to some of the other positions that exist on the team. Nate Hackett doesn't get a pass. Yes, there are. Nate Hackett doesn't get a pass. We're just not going to talk too much about it because we want to see what he does with. We want to see what he does with Kyle supporting, as I was tweeting out today. Kyle Williams and Nigel Bradham, the defense, those two combined for a pretty nice day on Sunday before they went out to knee injuries. Did we get an injury update on either of those guys today?
We're going to wait and see how they progress from Doug Marone, which is
Doug Marone.
become pretty vintage from him. Kyle was not in the locker room by the time I got in there, and neither was Nigel. I saw Kyle today. He was not walking with a significant limp, but I will say that doesn't necessarily mean there's no structural damage. I mean, a guy could walk without a limp and still have a serious injury. But he didn't have a limp. I saw Nigel walking with a pretty good limp after the game on Sunday. But at this point, we're at the mercy of Doug Marone, and we're waiting to see exactly. I think no news is good news at this point because you fear the worst when it's a knee injury, and both guys were ruled out as quickly as they were. But we're kind of waiting and seeing at this point.
The general sentiment I've been hearing and reading about is that Kyle isn't going to play this week, which means more Stephon Charles, of course. Jarris Wynn's already been getting a whole bunch of snaps, so maybe he kicks down into defensive tackle a little bit with Jerry Hughes getting some of his old snaps back. But what are they going to do at linebacker if Bradham can't go?
That'll probably be Preston Brown again. That guy's just been getting all the snaps, man. It seems like every week a new linebacker's injured and Preston's able to step in, and that's part of the benefit of cross-training him throughout training camp and his versatility as an athlete. He's only going to be better for it. I was talking to Joe B in the press box on Sunday with how few snaps Spikes has been getting. You can sort of start to see the future of the linebacker core materialize with Brown, Bradham, and Kiko. And those three guys are, I know I hate to bring up Kiko's name. I know,
you're okay. I'm fine with it. I'm fine.
But
I'm not going to cry, I swear.
But, you look at, the way Preston Brown's been playing, he hasn't been perfect, but he's playing all these different spots. He's doing everything, and he's, eating up the tackles. He's making mistakes, but the more experience he gets, the better. So if he has to fill in for Bradham, well, he's done it already, and he's played all the other spots too. So he's been the beneficiary of all the injuries at linebacker, and turns out that was the additions at linebacker were a good idea in the offseason by Mr. Whaley because they've needed the depth.
Okay, so they've needed the linebacker depth. What the heck is going on with the offensive line if? Well, first of all, they spent a lot of money on Chris Williams, and then their fifth-round rookie that some people thought might actually get cut at the beginning of training camp has stepped in and really not been that much of a downgrade, if a downgrade at all, in 1 week. What's going on at the guards? I know you said that they've been pretty terrible, but is there any way to fix it in this season?
I was asked about this earlier, and that was what I said was that you can't really fix it. It's a little late now. You got to kind of
say one name, Ed. There's one name.
And I've said this since training camp is that they should kick Cyrus Kouandjio inside and play him at guard. And I don't know that they're going to do that. Doug Marone hasn't brought it up. Doug Marone said something. One of many curious things Doug Marone has said. Since I've been here, he said that it's easier, or it's hard to go from tackle to guard. It's harder to go from tackle to guard than it is guard to tackle, which I don't think is true. But he said that, and he's an offensive line guy, so I guess we got to believe him. But this notion that Kouandjio isn't capable of that, I think they just don't want to give up on him as a tackle that soon. But I think he's actually a better guard. He has a chance to be a better guard than he does a tackle. Are they willing to move him in there and be, replace Eric Pierce? I don't know. But I think, what you're counting on at guard is Cyril Richardson developing and, showing some improvement, because that's the best hope, because Chris Williams is what he is. I don't know why they paid him that much money, because this is the same player he was in St. Louis, the same player he was in Chicago. People have moved him all around the offensive line, and he's been a weak spot no matter where you put him. So, and now he's injured on top of it, so I don't see that situation getting a whole lot better.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with that. But The name that surfaced early this week was Richie Incognito. Do you get any sense that that guy is on the radar at all, except for in quiet pockets of the internet?
No, yeah, the only place I've seen it is rumored on the internet, and it's actually, I mean, that's a pretty interesting one to bring up. I mean, yeah.
It would fix the problem.
It wouldn't hurt the problem, and at this point, I mean, you can't get much worse. You gotta bring in some competition, and that'd be interesting because that would be another one of those moves where it's like, you know what, we have to win right now, so we might as well go out and get everything we possibly can to make this happen. And there's I think there's enough leadership in that locker room to handle a guy like Incognito.
Oh yeah, well, he was already in that locker room with some of them too, so it would be interesting. It would be very interesting to see him come back and take some snaps next to Eric Wood and see how that captain would deal with it. It would be very interesting.
Yeah, as if we haven't had enough storylines to follow this season. That's what we need. Incognito coming back. I'm all for it. Bring it on, I guess.
Traffic records at BuffaloRumblings.com for like the 5th time this year. Yeah, absolutely. We can't get away without talking about Corey Graham. What's going on with that cornerback rotation? Because we've been seeing him play some really good ball, and then all of a sudden he just had a pretty awful, 8 snaps? I think it was only 8 snaps against the Texans.
Yeah, he got beat for the touchdown, which, okay, like, that wasn't a good play by Corey Graham. He misjudged the ball and got beat, but to me, the weird thing is the message wasn't the same this week as it was a week ago, because when asked why Corey Graham only got 8 snaps, Marone said, yeah, we're rotating those guys, and Stephon and Leotis were hot, and we're going to ride the hot hand. But that wasn't true when Corey Graham was the hot hand. Because,
right.
So that's what, and also Leotis was not a hot hand Sunday. He got the interception, which made a lot of people forgive him, but he played poorly for most of the game. And Stephon Gilmore hasn't been the hot hand for most of the season from where I've been sitting. So that didn't make sense, and that's another one of those,
He talks out of both sides of his mouth.
Exactly, and so it's like, and it was the same thing with why didn't you stick with the running game? It just wasn't true, the answer. So it's like the 8 snaps for Corey Graham doesn't make sense. Yes, he got beat, and maybe that gives him an excuse to keep him on the bench, but I don't know why you would want to. He was playing well before that, and also, how do you get into a rhythm when you're thrown into a game for 8 snaps?
Yeah, and Leotis McKelvin has been playing plenty awful, and they kept that guy on the field. They kept starting him too.
I don't understand what the loyalty to Leotis McKelvin is. He was a first-round pick, more than half a decade ago. It's like, it's been a while since he was a first-round pick. You can admit that he's not a number 1 corner, and I understand some of the loyalty to Stephon Gilmore, but Corey Graham's the best cornerback on the roster right now. He's playing the best football. So if you want to give your team the best chance to win, which that's been the message all week with Orton, well, you got your best cornerback sitting on the bench for 90% of your snaps.
Yeah. I know that you haven't been around this beat for as long as some folks, and you certainly haven't been as ingrained in it as I have, but I think that there's some fitting closure coming to the Ralph Wilson legacy this week. I think it's very, very fitting that the Wilson's last game as owner is going to be in Detroit, where he began as a minority NFL owner in the 1950s. Has anybody talked about that at One Bills Drive this week, whether it's the brass or the players? Like, this is going to be Ralph Wilson's last game as owner of the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, it's kind of something that's been pushed to the side quite a bit because of Orton, it seems like everything is getting in the way of that. And it doesn't seem like it'll hit people until, and I was just talking about this earlier with somebody, some people from Massachusetts. Some of my friends are coming in for the Patriots game, and I said, you better buy your tickets soon, because as soon as people realize that the new owner's coming in, the ticket prices are going to go up. Like, obviously we all know that's going to be Pagula's first game as owner, but it seems like it hasn't hit everybody yet, which is kind of strange. It's kind of just like, until it's official, everybody's still holding their breath. And but yeah, it's a great point. I mean, Ralph Wilson's last game as owner is going to be this weekend, and a lot of people might not realize that. And he already had the last home game. The Wilson's last home game has already passed. So I mean, the Pegula era is going to be here, and it's going to probably be a pretty swift takeover here in a couple weeks. It seems like. I mean, we'll see.
Yeah, Russ Brandon was talking a little bit about it in his radio appearance this morning. About he didn't mention what it was going to be, or he didn't even really tease it. He's just like, you better get in your seats early because it's going to be something special. And there's no doubt in my mind it's going to be something special. They gave Ralph a great send-off Mr. Wilson a great send-off before the week one, or I guess it was week 2, the home opener where they had Jim Kelly and all those guys come in and right before the Dolphins game, and it's going to be very interesting because he did the thing with the Sabres when he walked out and he kind of waved to the crowd and gave a little wave, but there's going to be way more people in that Bills stadium, and that place is. I mean, yeah, people worried that the Sabres were going to be leaving, but it's going to go bonkers when they announce this guy on next Sunday, right?
It's going to be cool. I kind of feel like I'm cheating a little bit. It's like I jumped in here, this year, and I get the Wilson send off, and and then Pegula taking over. I think it's going to be a really cool atmosphere, and like you said, it's going to be. I still feel like people are holding their breath over this whole thing, even though we know Pegula bought the team. It's a virtual certainty that he's going to pass the vote on next week, Wednesday, whenever it is. But people still seem like they're holding their breath until there's pen to paper and Pegula, steps out there in front of a microphone and says the Bills are staying in Buffalo. And as soon as he does that, it's going to be pretty cool. And I think, this is the first time that the Bills have sort of gone through this. It's going to be a very unique day at Ralph Wilson Stadium. I guess I listen to Mr. Brandon, I guess. Get in your seats because who knows what they'll do. I don't know.
Absolutely. Well, I've certainly taken up enough of your time. I really appreciate talking with you, Matthew Fairburn from Syracuse.com. I'm still waiting on my Detroit Lions blogger. He just emailed me about 5 minutes ago saying he was having some computer problems and he was going to restart. So I'm going to vamp from here on out. I really appreciate all the time you spent with us. I said a half an hour and it's been 40 minutes. So like I said, thank you very much. You can read his stuff at Syracuse.com and at Matthew Fairburn on Twitter. Is there anything else I should tell them about how to get a hold of you, Matthew?
No, my email's on there somewhere if there's something you want to read about, or want to just tell me I suck. Yeah, my email box is open to you.
Yeah, that's the Syracuse.com comment section, right?
Yeah, that's true. You can even be anonymous there. And I should clear up that somebody today said, why do people hire Patriots fans to be Bills writers? And they lumped me in with that, and I was never a Patriots fan. So
well, that's good.
Clear that up for everyone out there.
That's good, and I can assure you I've never been a Patriots fan as well. All right. Thank you, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Okay. So, like I said, we're still waiting on our Pride of Detroit blogger to come give us a little bit of a breakdown of the Detroit Lions, this week's opponent. I don't know about anyone else, but I've had Calvin Johnson on my fantasy football team for years just because the guy's a total stud. He plays every week, and he's kind of injured right now, and we'll get a little bit of a breakdown of what he's going through today, I hope, when we come back. I'm scanning the comments section now, so if you have questions about the Bills, make sure you throw them in there, and we'll get to it. Yes, Bills fans, San Diego 619 beat the Patsies. Let's go Buffalo. A few years ago when the Bills were able to pull off that win and finally beat the Patriots with that Fred Jackson run at the very end of the game, that place went nuts. It was going to be big, and this one's going to be – this one has the potential to be even bigger. If they win this week against the Detroit Lions, it's going to be a pretty remarkable atmosphere, like Matthew said. Get your tickets now if that's a place you want to be. It's normally my tailgate weekend, but and actually, I don't think I've announced this on Buffalo Rumblings Live, so I'm going to right now. My wife's actually 8 months pregnant with our second child, so my son could be born any day now. And, of course, 2 weeks from now, when the Patriots come to town and the Pegulas are the new owners, it'll be a little bit more of a wait and see time for me. So it's not a game that I will be able to attend in person, but I will be watching it somewhere, even if it's in a hospital room, and they got Wi-Fi there, so we'll be okay. So yeah, there's my big announcement. Yeah, Sergeant Major Thor just asked me which game I'm going to. Well, I'm probably not going to a game with a newborn. It's just timing, you know. It's not unfortunate timing. We planned it that way, and that's how it worked. So that's what it is. It is what it is sometimes. A lot of these questions are for. Okay, which configuration of the current offensive line roster do you think gives us the best chance to win? I think it's probably the one you saw on Sunday with Cyril Richardson at left guard, Eric Pierce at right guard. Maybe Chris Hairston could be better, maybe at right guard. The Bills coaches certainly don't seem to think so. So I'll leave it to them. Craig Urbick would probably not make as many mental mistakes as Cyril Richardson. So I guess if I'm going purely by what I want to see, I would rather probably see Urbick in there as opposed to Cyril Richardson, at least for right now. So I'd go Glenn, Urbick, Wood, Pierce, and then Henderson at right tackle for now. I guess those guards are terrible. I know that Marone doesn't favor Urbick, and so that's never going to happen, but that's what I would see. Yeah, and so Buffalo Bergadelphia agrees with me on that. Yes, Salt Pounder is exactly right. He likes Pierce because he is gigantic. That's exactly right. That's why he likes him better than Urbick, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me either because Urbick's a pretty big dude himself. So I don't know. Schwartz will have plenty of insight for game planning the Lions. This is dragging. Should we expect Detroit to try and surprise us with tricks or just rely on execution? They have a completely different offensive coordinator, a completely different defensive coordinator. Pretty much everyone's different on the coaching staffs. So I wouldn't expect too much to be the same. He might know player tendencies and things like that, but I wouldn't expect a whole lot of it to be game planned against by the Bills. Maybe one or two places they might want to attack or things like that. So, I don't know. It's not like the Bills can stick with a game plan anyways. It's one of the reasons why their running back has been going the running game's been going so crappy. Thanks all of you guys for the congratulations. I really appreciate that. I haven't put it on the blog just because there's not really a good place to put it. Like, do I put it in the fan post section? I don't know. So I'll put it here, and then the word will spread, I'm sure. So, and then you'll notice when I'm not posting 15 fan shots every morning like I've been doing. So we're not naming him Matt Jr. and James Kelly Warren has been vetoed, so I can't do that either. It would be, as Ron pointed out, it would be auspicious if my child was born on the day the new owner takes over. And I've always liked the name Ralph. I'm just saying. We're not. I don't know if my wife would go for that. She can't hear me right now because I'm in the basement. Whoa. I just put our Lions blogger on mute because it was pretty loud when he was coming in. And so, if he does get in here, I will unmute it. I'm taking a look at that right now. Yeah, I was able to dodge the EJ Manuel bullet. I don't have to do that naming him after EJ thing, so that's good. Where's Brian Incognito? I promised him I wouldn't tell you, but he had a really, really good excuse, so you make sure you ask him about it tomorrow. I don't think he's around tonight, but ask him about it tomorrow. So, yeah, let's see here. Trying to unmute this guy, but I guess he's muted himself, so that's fine. Over under on the turnovers for this week, Ron asked. I wouldn't expect Orton to turn it over too many times, so I'll say 2. I'll say 2. So I'm going under. You're 3.5 for sure. Yeah. Oh, hi. Jerry, can you hear me?
Hey, how's it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. It's good. Welcome to Buffalo Rumblings Live. We've just been vamping a little bit. Uh, so yeah, Jerry, tell us what you do for prideofdetroit.com.
Well, as you know, PrivateTrade.com, part of SB Nation. I handle the videos over there. So we got some great writers. They break down everything, perfectly. I squeeze in there. I'll give you a little analysis, a little opinion, try to add some comedy. So basically just a video contributor over there at PrivateTrade.com.
Great. So you're like me, except for I have to do social media too, which takes a lot more time and things like that. So that's cool. So let's dive right in. The Bills are going with a new quarterback this week, a guy you're kind of familiar with, in Kyle Orton. Tell me how Kyle Orton and the Buffalo Bills offense can attack the Detroit Lions defense.
Well, a couple of things. For one, E.J. Manuel's speed and his elusiveness, I think, would have been good because the Lions, we have a pretty good defensive line. So E.J. Manuel would have been able to extend the play a little bit more than Kyle Orton. However, Orton is a better passer. Orton's going to use the weapons with accuracy a little bit better. So I look at this game. Is it better that Kyle Orton's in there? Yeah, he's probably a better quarterback at this point than E.J. Manuel. However, with him not being as mobile, the Lions have a great defensive line. That may come to hurt you guys just a little bit.
Okay, so if you're crafting the game plan that's going to beat the Detroit Lions defense, where are you starting? Where's their Achilles heel, to use a tired cliche?
And you got to promise not to give this to the the guys over at Buffalo. But
I don't know. They might be watching right now. I really don't know.
Of course. No. Well, I think one thing is, you guys got Jim Schwartz there as your defensive coordinator, so that's going to help. He's probably familiar with this team. But I think the way that you attack this defense, which is rated #1 at this point, which is surprising, is use your aggressiveness against them. Fairly, Sue, these guys, sometimes they'll over pursue. So if you're going to run the ball, delayed runs, a draw here or there, where you can get those defensive tackles kind of over pursuing. Seems as though screens, halfback screens, seems to work pretty good. Anything where you kind of use their aggressiveness against them. If you're going to be traditional, if you're going to stand back in the pocket for too long, it could hurt you. But if you use their aggressiveness, sometimes these guys will over pursue. So, and we're kind of waiting for our cornerbacks to play like we were expecting them, which is bad. They haven't yet. We're still a little bit worried that we can be beat through the air. It just hasn't happened yet.
Okay, so last week we tried that with J.J. Watt, and he kind of took it back for an 80-yard touchdown that swung the momentum of the game completely in the Houston Texans' favor. It was a little swing pass to Fred Jackson that E.J. Manuel didn't quite get up and over the top. It's something that I'm sure that the Lions are going to game plan for. So if they can't use the screen, are they susceptible to anything in the running game? Are they? You said you're waiting for your cornerbacks to come around. What type of? If the screen game isn't working, what other types of things can they use?
Well, early on in the Jets game, which was surprising, Chris Ivory, he actually just ran up the middle, and it worked. We weren't used to that. Our run defense has been great, but for whatever reason, the Jets started to abandon that. The first possession, he ran up the middle. We couldn't stop him. They ended up getting a field goal. Then after that, they decided to let Geno Smith pass the ball a lot. I still think our run defense is top-notch, but if the screen pass does not work, which I really do think that's the way that you guys can have some success against us, but if that isn't working, I think Fred Jackson might be utilized a little bit more so. He seems to be someone that can run between the tackles a little bit better. I don't see Spiller, the outside runs, the halfback tosses, the stretches. Those don't generally work as well. His hand size is really good in run defense. So I think if you guys are going to attack us and be successful, it would be with Fred Jackson. It would be with the delay. It would be with the draw, as opposed to C.J. Spiller getting on the outside. Because Levy also having a great year. He's been able to snuff out some of those longer stretch-type plays for running backs.
We're talking with Jerry Mallory from Pride of Detroit, which is SB Nation's Detroit Lions site, and it's one of my favorite names on the SB Nation blog network. The Falcoholic is a very good name. Addicted to Quack, which is our Oregon Ducks blog, is another excellent name. The addictions seem to run well, but of course Pride of Detroit plays on the Lions name and things like that. What are what are Lions fans' memories of Kyle Orton? Ron from New Mexico, one of our readers, asked that question for you.
Well, to me, he was kind of ho-hum when he was in Chicago. I mean, he had some success. He seemed to be better than Rex Grossman. For whatever reason, Lovie Smith loved Rex Grossman. You probably remember sound bites. Rex Grossman is our quarterback. Rex Grossman is our quarterback. Meanwhile, in the limited time that Kyle Orton had, he was better. But this is a division where we've seen Brett Favre, where we've seen Aaron Rodgers, a division where even Minnesota has had good quarterbacks here and there, Dante Culpepper. So, to be honest, he didn't really stick out. We've had some really good quarterbacks in this division, and the Bears, probably, unfortunately, until Jay Cutler's been here, has not been known for their quarterbacks. When he was there, it was their defense. So, better than Rex Grossman, didn't really stand out too much. And so, we're hoping that he's still rusty because, we've seen he hasn't had a ton of action in the last few seasons.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's something like 61 passes in the last 3 years, or I think that's the number. It's close to that. We know a lot about Ndamukong Suh, but just like last week, J.J. Watt doesn't have a whole lot of talent around him on the defensive line with Jadeveon Clowney on the sidelines with an injury. What are we looking at with the rest of the Detroit Lions defensive line, and are we going to be able to block those guys? We had a terrible time last week. It was like J.J. Watt was living all up in E.J. Manuel's grill. Is that going to be a problem this week?
Yeah, it's going to be a problem. You've got Suh. Suh's one of the best defensive linemen in the league. He's no J.J. Watt, but no one in the NFL is a J.J. Watt. However, the Lions have some really good, talented players on that line. Right next to Suh is Nick Fairley, who has been inconsistent. We all remember him at Auburn, one of the best defensive players in SEC and all of college. He's been up and down his whole career. This year, he's on a contract year. We didn't send him, and now he's playing motivated. He lost some weight. He gained some weight. He got benched, I want to say second or third preseason game. Then he lost weight again. He's been playing really good. He's been playing motivated. But then we have some pretty good defensive ends as well. Ziggy Ansah, I think he's still coming around. He had off-season surgery. He's getting a lot better than George Johnson. This guy, we grabbed him, just off the scrap heap. He was cut by several teams. We pick him up. I don't think the Lions had any intention on keeping him. I think he was camp fodder, someone just a body you throw out there. Well, he played great in the preseason. He actually went out, earned a spot, and he's playing pretty good. He's got a couple of sacks as well. So you couple that with our defensive coordinator, Terrell Lawson, you're going to see a lot of our defensive line. Our linebackers are going to blitz as well. DeAndre Levy, probably one of the more underrated players in the league, just like you guys with Kyle Williams. I don't think a lot of people talk about him. Great player. That's DeAndre Levy for our team. Not a lot of press and publicity, but I think it's coming this year. So we've got a few players around Suh that can bring some noise, bring a little havoc.
So if the Bills do decide to try and test the Lions secondary, has it improved at all? You were saying something, you were worried about the cornerbacks coming around?
Yeah, I'm worried about them becoming bad, actually. They're actually the top, I don't know if they're number one or number two. I want to say we're number two right now in pass defense. I think a lot of that's predicated off the actual defensive line creating pressure. But as a fan, as someone that watches the Lions, we're kind of waiting for the cornerbacks to come around in terms of playing bad because we've seen them struggle so much. Rasheem Mathis is older. Darius Slay really struggled last year. But, for whatever reason, Rasheem Mathis, maybe he sipped from the fountain of youth. He's playing great. Darius Slay in his second year really showing why we drafted him in the second round early on. Glover Quinn, we have a little change now. When he was with Houston, he was a free safety. He comes here as a free agent, and Jim Schwartz kind of used safeties interchangeable. I don't know if he's doing that with you guys here in Buffalo, but we didn't have an actual free safety and a strong safety. This year, Glover Quinn is actually a free safety, which is his natural position. He's playing great. So our secondary has been playing really good. Lots of injuries. Bill Bentley starting nickel cornerback on the IR. Nevin Lawson on the IR. Seems like whoever is our nickel cornerback gets hurt, but this team has been piecing it together. I think a lot has to do though with that line of bringing pressure, making it harder for the quarterback to have that time.
Right, which is of course a hallmark of the Schwartz defense, which is probably one of the reasons he came to Buffalo with Buffalo's vaunted defensive line. Let's flip to the other side of the ball for a second, and really it starts and ends with Megatron. Is Calvin Johnson? Well, I won't ask you the question that was posted in our comment section. How healthy is he?
Unfortunately, this has not been a healthy season for Calvin, and we've seen this time and time again. He was really used as a decoy last week against the Jets. He had 2 catches for 12 yards. We know that's not Calvin Johnson whatsoever. Just looking at reports right now, he says that he's feeling better this Wednesday than he did last week. Also, he feels as though the ankle injury is not getting worse by playing, by running. So, all signs point to him being more effective. 100%, I don't know. But they've got a lot of other weapons this year. And we showed that last week against the Jets. Stafford not keen in on Calvin as much. So even if he is hurt, let's say last week he was 50%, I would say this week he's closer to 75, 80%.
And he can do a lot of damage at 80%, of course. And they obviously didn't to go after him last week. Let's talk about the tight end situation over there, because our linebackers have had some problems covering running backs, wide receiver, the love of God, and then, of course, tight ends. How are your tight ends playing this year, especially with the additions you made? Well, I mean, Pettigrew you re-signed, and then you drafted Ebron, right?
Well, tight ends are playing pretty good. They're not being used. They're not being targeted as much as we've expected. Joe Fourier, who was probably initially he's our biggest red zone threat for tight end. He was second on the depth chart. Didn't get used a lot, but he got hurt. And Eric Ebron, not a ton of targets yet, but he's been efficient. He's shown that he can run after the catch. He had 3 catches last week, finally got in the end zone. Pettigrew's being used sparingly. I think they're kind of going with the New Orleans mode. We've got Joe Lombardi there, where Pettigrew's more of a blocking tight end. He's one of the best blockers at tight end in the league. So he's being used as a blocker a little bit more, and they're slowly but surely bringing Eric Ebron out, especially with Fourier being hurt. So, not Fourier, excuse me, Ebron is someone you guys are going to have to worry about. The linebackers struggle against tight ends. I can definitely see Stafford targeting him. He got his feet wet last week with the touchdown, so maybe the confidence is growing. They haven't been used a lot, but it's definitely a weapon in their arsenal that if they see a weakness on the other team, that we may try to exploit.
We've been talking with Jerry Mallory from prideofdetroit.com, our SB Nation's Detroit Lions site. So I'll get you out with one more question. What advantages do you see well, I'll let you pick the team. What advantage do you see with one team having over the other?
Well, the Bills, to me, you guys started off with that win against Chicago, which was great, because
you're welcome.
Yeah, right. Thank you so much. That was pretty cool. But when that happened, I was shocked. Just coming into this season, not 100% sure what the team was going to be, the Buffalo Bills, but I definitely didn't see them opening up with that win. I think that shows that you guys can win on the road. However, the Lions have been very tough at home. I mean, you look at the first 2 weeks, the first 2 home games. One was against the New York Giants. It was a rout. And we were looking, and man, the Giants are horrible. But lo and behold, the Giants aren't that bad. And the Lions were just that stout at home. And then facing Aaron Rodgers, someone that we never beat, a game that Aaron Rodgers finished, he's always defeated us. I mean, we held them to 7 points. I think the momentum is there. The Bills is a good team. I don't think it's going to be an absolute rout. But the fact that this game is at home at Ford Field, I got to give the edge to the Lions. If this was in Buffalo, it'd be a different story. You guys will have a much better shot, obviously. But at this point, until the Lions falter at home, they've looked very good, especially the defense. Until they prove me otherwise, I'm going to roll with the Lions for this one.
Okay. What questions do you have for me about the Buffalo Bills?
All right, cool. I got a couple. I'm sure you've touched on them already, but I want to, ask you a few again. We'll throw this up on our site the next day or so. With Manuel, were you guys, as a community, shocked that this was coming? It seems as though we were blindsided, just as fans of the NFL. Was this something that was in the making for a while? EJ getting benched?
Once they signed Kyle Orton right at the tail end of the preseason, he actually didn't even play a preseason snap for the Bills. People started to talk about it. They didn't have a backup behind him that we really felt capable of taking his job midway through the season. Even Thad Lewis, who had a couple nice games for us last year in relief of an injured E.J. Manuel, we never really thought he was going to be able to take E.J. Manuel's job. And when they signed Kyle Orton, that whole thing kind of changed. And people were looking at the bye week and saying, well, give Orton a couple months, give E.J. Manuel a little bit of time to fall on his face, and then maybe it'll happen. The biggest reason this is probably happening is the change of ownership, which is going to happen in about a week, actually. With Terry Pagula buying the Buffalo Bills from the Ralph Wilson estate, stuff could start happening much, much sooner. And if Doug Marone doesn't do something, it's really going to push Terry Pagula's hand to fire him at the end of the year. No matter who he keeps around in the front office, it's going to push back on the coach. And the other part of it is we started to see the wide receivers get visibly frustrated on the field with passes from E.J. Manuel being off target, whether it was setting them up for kill shots or just for failure, not being able to get a first down because the ball's behind him instead of in front of him when they can get another couple yards on, say, 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 4. Robert Woods was throwing his hands up after plays, and he was missing wide open receivers. So surprise isn't the right word. I was a little bit surprised that it happened so soon in the season, but at the same time, the Bills are 2-2. They're in the lead in the AFC East after all the tiebreakers are assigned and everything else, and it just feels like a chance that they can really make a push, and they think that Kyle Orton can do it. I don't know what they do if Kyle Orton comes in and is terrible, because they don't have another quarterback on the roster. I don't know if they can play the hokey pokey and put E.J. Manuel back in unless Kyle Orton suffers an injury. So it's going to be interesting to see how the season plays out. But they're essentially saying, here, Kyle, lead us to the playoffs, or we're all going to lose our jobs, and so are you.
Right. And, looking at the climate of the AFC East, which is my next question, I can see why they would be, you guys would be more comfortable with a guy that's done it before. That's kind of a segue to my next question. I know years past, you guys come in the season, and it's the Patriots. You're looking at the Patriots. They've won this division so many times. I know Miami squeezed in one random year, but year in and year out, you're looking at the Patriots. This is the team. I don't know if as a community you guys are shooting for the wild card sometime, but this year is different. The Patriots are struggling mightily. They looked awful on Monday night. Is there like a renewed sense of hope for the Buffalo Bills?
I don't think there is yet. I think if the Patriots come to Buffalo next Sunday after we play you guys this weekend, and the Bills are able to beat them, I think that then that conversation will probably start, because I think the Bills have won once in the last, 12 or I can't remember the season that they opened with a win over the Patriots, but Dick Duran was the coach, so it was a pretty long time ago. And the Patriots have had the Bills number, and so in order to be the best, you have to. If they can't do that, especially at home in Terry Pagula's first game as owner, that place is going to be going absolutely crazy. Until they can do that, I don't see them doing that. Even though the Patriots beat the Raiders at home by 7 and then went and got smoked by the Chiefs, they have not played well this year. Tom Brady doesn't look like Tom Brady anymore. He's actually the same age that Jim Kelly was when Jim Kelly retired, believe it or not. So it's very interesting to look around the AFC East right now, and Geno Smith and Mike Vick going through the same thing that E.J. Manuel was going through with Kyle Orton, and then down at Ryan Tannehill, who had a great game this weekend, but just, 9 days ago, his coach wasn't even saying he was going to start that weekend. So it's definitely a wide open division right now. That could all change in the next 2 weeks if the Bills lose to Detroit and New England, and then they're 2-4 and probably looking at another head coaching change.
Right. Now, just a couple more questions. One is about Jim Schwartz, a guy that we're definitely familiar with here in Detroit. I think ultimately he's better suited as a coordinator, which was what he was before he became the head coach. What has he brought differently to this defense? How has the defense changed since Schwartz been in as the coordinator?
The biggest change that we probably knew was coming was they don't blitz nearly as often as they did under Mike Pettin, who's now the head coach in Cleveland, obviously. Pettin brought pressure on a lot of snaps, and we haven't seen a whole lot of extra defenders coming in. At one point, actually, on Sunday, we saw only 3 pass rushers, and I can't remember who it was. It may have been Mario, dropped into coverage. And so he really hasn't been bringing a whole lot of extra pressure, and he's been really relying on the quarterbacks to make plays. And Corey Graham did that for the first few weeks and then kind of fell off last week as they've been rotating him out for some stupid reason that nobody really knows. But Leotis McKelvin and Stephon Gilmore have been exposed a little bit because of that. They didn't have to cover quite as long under Mike Pettin because the ball was going to be out. Now that they were beat or they were in a good position to make a play because the quarterback was being rushed. But under Jim Schwartz, they haven't quite been having the same thing. Now, the Bills are still getting sacks, especially in the first couple weeks when teams were playing from behind against them. But the biggest change is they're not blitzing as much, which shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody who's covered Jim Schwartz.
Oh, yeah, we were used to that, for sure, bringing that pressure with the defensive line. Well, last question is just kind of a two-part. How do you guys plan on attacking Detroit? I'm sure you know they have a vertical offense, and they have this defensive line is very notarized.
Mm-hmm.
How do you guys plan on attacking Detroit, and what's your outlook for this game, a prediction? What do you think is going to end up happening?
I really hope that they start to push the ball down the field. One of the reasons J.J. Watt was able to intercept that short pass to Fred Jackson, was that the Bills were operating under a really short passing game with not a ton of screens, just like swing passes and short plays to Robert Woods and other receivers and the crossing patterns and things like that. But if they can go back to what they were able to do in the first week against Chicago, those 25-yard intermediate routes and things like that, I think it'll really put some pressure on the Detroit Lions. However, if Kyle Orton's a statue back there and getting crushed by the defensive front of Detroit, I don't know what they're going to be able to do other than the short passing game that you and I have already talked about tonight. So I would anticipate that both of those things are going to be in the ball game, but they're going to give Kyle Orton a little bit of a chance to read the field, and hopefully he can find some open receivers. There have been plenty of guys in space for the Bills, and enough time for E.J. Manuel to deliver the ball. He just hasn't been able to do that. So I'm hoping Kyle Orton can actually make those 10, 15, 20-yard passes that E.J. Manuel has left on the field for the last few weeks. On the defensive side of the ball, Kyle Williams is on track to not play this game right now. He didn't practice today. He's been dealing with a knee injury since about halfway through the Houston Texans game last Sunday.
Very happy.
Oh, I'm sure it does, yeah. But he's one of the few guys on the team that if he doesn't practice all week, he still might play on Sunday. The Bills have some nice depth guys behind them that have shown well in limited appearances. It's going to be interesting to see how they hold up a little bit over a longer period of time. Stephon Charles was a Detroit Lion, right? Is that wrong? Okay. He's one of the guys that's been rotating in and had a pretty good time. He's been kind of a journeyman guy that's been on a few teams. So if I got him mixed up with who was the other guy? Now I can't remember who the other guy was. Anyway, that they cut right before the season. But it'll be interesting to see how they rotate through. I think Jarius Wynn will get a few more looks at defensive tackle with a guy like Jerry Hughes coming in and playing a little bit more at defensive end. So that's I don't think that the Bills are going to change up anything on their defense, and I think the biggest matchup problem is going to be at the wide receiver position, particularly whoever's coming across the middle and the linebacker has to pick up. So like the tight ends, we had some problems with Martellus Bennett, even though we were able to shut down the Bears wide receivers for the most part. They still made some pretty nice catches. Also, I forgot to say you're welcome for Joey Bell, who used to play for the Buffalo Bills as well. He was one of our preseason superstars that we always knew would do well. Oh, Bills fan San Diego, let me know in the comment section that the guy I was looking for was Landon Cohen. He was the other defensive tackle we were looking at. One of those two guys played for the Lions at some point, even if it was just for a cup of coffee or like a practice squad spot or something like that.
With us for a little bit, off and on, and we ended up lose.
Okay, so I got it mixed up because they really were the same guy throughout most of the preseason. They would come in and play pretty well, and then they just had to let one of them go because they wanted to keep an extra pass rusher. Oh, and I forgot to tell you that I really don't think the Bills are going to win this game. I would give it to the Lions for a lot of the same reasons you did. But Kyle Orton's been here for a month, and he doesn't have a rapport with the receivers. That doesn't mean he's going to be worse than E.J. Manuel, let me remind you, who also apparently didn't have a very good rapport with the receivers based on where his passes were thrown. But it's just hard to imagine that the Bills are going to go into Detroit after not being able to beat the Houston Texans and actually do something. So I'll give the edge to the Lions. I'm with you, though. I don't think it's going to be a blowout. I don't think this Bills team is built to be blown out. I think they have a solid defense. They have good pieces on offense that if they get them the ball, they can make things happen. So I'll give it to the Lions in an edge, but I'm still going to be yelling at the TV screen pretty hard on Sunday.
Oh, yeah, it should be a good game. Those are all the questions I had, man.
Great.
I really appreciate you being on here, too.
Absolutely. So we've been with Jerry Mallory from Pride of Detroit. I'm Matt Warren from Buffalo Rumblings. And everyone have a great Wednesday night. See you Sunday.